A U.S. Marine walked behind a German Shepherd into the ravine and discovered what needed saving. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our Marine. The wind is falling quiet over the Montana foothills when Staff Sergeant Daniel Cross notices the shepherd for the first time. A tall, sable-coated German shepherd standing alone at the tree line, watching him with a stillness that feels almost intentional. Daniel pauses on the gravel road, one hand resting on the strap of his pack, sensing something in the dog's posture, an urgency wrapped in silence. Ridge, as he will later name him, takes one slow step back into the pines. Then another. Then he turns his head, amber eyes flicking toward Daniel like a whispered request. Follow me. Daniel exhales, a thin mist leaving his lips in the cold evening air. He has spent years reading signals, wind shifts, boot tracks, the tremor in a young recruit's voice before fear breaks through, but there's something different about this moment. Something quiet. Something older than training. Ridge slips deeper into the trees, never rushing, never losing sight of the Marine behind him. The forest smells of pine sap and damp soil, the kind that clings to memory. Branches whisper underfoot. A raven calls once, then goes still. Daniel's breath settles into a slower rhythm as he trails the dog down a narrow path carved by water and time. Ridge moves with certainty, as if he is following a thread only he can sense. When the trees part, Daniel sees it, a ravine cut into the earth like an old wound. The sun is sinking behind the ridge, casting long strokes of gold across the rocks. Ridge stops at the edge, ears forward, posture tense but not afraid. Daniel approaches carefully, boots scraping against the stone, and peers into the dimming shadows below. He hears it before he sees anything. A faint sound carried upward on a thin ribbon of cold air. Not quite a cry. Not quite a breath. Something. Fragile. Something fading. Ridge lowers his head, letting out a soft, urgent whine, and Daniel feels his chest tighten with the weight of a truth he hasn't yet reached but already understands. Whatever waits in that darkness, it's alive. And it needs them both. Daniel steadies himself at the rim of the ravine, letting the cold air rise against his face like a warning. The forest has gone very still, as if every branch and shadow is holding its breath. Ridge stands beside him, tail low, ears tilted toward the faint sound echoing from below. It is fragile, thin, almost swallowed by the stone walls, yet unmistakably alive. Daniel adjusts the small flashlight clipped to his vest, its beam trembling slightly as it cuts through the dusk. The sides of the ravine glisten with moisture, streaked with layers of rock that look worn by years of rain. He tests the ground with his boot, feeling how the dirt shifts beneath the surface. The slope is steep, but not impossible. Ridge steps closer, brushing his shoulder against Daniel's leg, a quiet insistence that steadies him more than words could. Daniel lowers himself carefully, hands gripping the rough stone, breath slow, controlled. Each foot of descent deepens the chill around him. The air carries the scent of wet earth and something faintly metallic, the kind of smell that comes before a storm. Ridge stays at the top, pacing the edge, eyes never leaving him. Daniel pauses on a narrow ledge halfway down and listens again. The sound is clearer now. A faint, uneven whisper that rises and falls against the rock. Not wind. Not water. Something human. He calls out softly, his voice moving through the darkness like a thread. There is no answer, only that small, trembling sound that pulls him deeper. His fingers brush a patch of moss, cold and slick, and for a moment he feels the old ache in his shoulder, the one injury that never quite healed. He whispers a breath toward the open sky, not a prayer exactly, but something close. When his boots finally hit the bottom, the ground is softer than he expects, layered with fallen leaves and scattered branches. The beam of his light catches the curve of the ravine wall, then sweeps across the ground until it lands on a small impression in the dirt. Something has shifted here recently. Something small. Ridge lets out a single bark from above, urgent but controlled, guiding his attention toward the far corner where the shadows deepen. Daniel moves slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile quiet of the place. The sound comes again, a faint, wavering hum that tugs at the edges of his chest. He steps closer, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him like the dimming light. Whatever is waiting in that corner did not come here by choice, and it has been holding on with the last thread of strength it has left. Daniel kneels, letting the beam of his light soften as it touches the darkness ahead. What he sees there makes his breath catch, not from fear, but from the fragile truth revealed in a single, quivering motion. Something small. Something cold. Something that has been waiting for someone who would finally hear its call. Daniel eases the flashlight lower, letting the beam soften so it does not startle whatever is curled in the shadows. The shape is small, barely larger than his forearm, wrapped in a worn fabric that looks damp from the cold ground. As he inches closer, the faint hum steadies into a trembling breath. The child is lying on her side, knees tucked in as if she has been trying to hold on to warmth that the ravine has slowly taken from her. Her hair is tangled with leaves, her cheeks pale beneath a thin layer of dust, but her chest rises in a fragile rhythm that pulls Daniel's own breath into sync. He kneels slowly, making sure the ground beneath him does not shift. The air feels colder here, as if the walls of stone are guarding the last bit of warmth surrounding this little life. Daniel reaches out a hand, stopping inches before touching her, giving her the space to sense him. Then her eyelids flutter, a tiny motion that feels like a spark in the quiet. Her voice, when it comes, is barely a whisper. It sounds like a question, though no words form clearly. Daniel answers with a soft reassurance, keeping his tone low and steady, the way he used to speak to new recruits on nights when the desert felt too large. Above, Ridge lets out a short, encouraging bark, as if reminding Daniel that the path back up waits for them. Daniel checks the child's breathing again. It is shallow but present, like a candle flame in a breeze. He slides one arm beneath her shoulders, feeling the chill soaking through her clothes, and the weight of her trust pressing into his hands. Her fingers twitch lightly against his sleeve, not grabbing, just confirming that someone is there. Someone who will not leave her. Daniel lifts her carefully, making sure her head is supported, and rises to his feet with a slow, deliberate motion. The ground responds with a soft crackle of leaves. Ridge circles anxiously at the top as Daniel looks up, planning each foothold, gauging which spots will hold and which will crumble. The child's breath warms the inside of his arm, a reminder of how close her strength is to fading. Daniel adjusts his stance, feeling his boots grip the stone, and begins the climb. Ridge's silhouette moves along the ridge, matching his pace, watching every shift of his balance, every careful step upward. The sky above is darkening, deep blue pushing toward night, but a thin line of gold lingers just long enough to guide them. Halfway up, Daniel pauses to catch a breath, letting the air settle around them. The child stirs faintly, her forehead brushing his shoulder, a soft sign that she is still here, still holding on. Ridge gives a gentle whine from above, a quiet promise that the top is close, that the way out is waiting. Daniel takes another step, then another, carrying her toward the fading light. Daniel feels the weight of the child shift slightly in his arms as he climbs, her small breath brushing against the fabric of his jacket like a reminder that every second matters. Ridge moves along the rim above him, pausing only to glance back, his silhouette etched against the fading gold of the sky. The forest has grown quieter, the kind of quiet that settles when dusk begins to fold into evening. Daniel reaches a narrow shelf of rock and pauses, steadying his footing. He adjusts the child gently, making sure her head rests securely against his shoulder. Her fingers curl faintly, brushing the sleeve of his jacket in a soft, instinctive motion that feels like a plea for reassurance. Daniel murmurs a gentle word, more for her comfort than his own, and shifts his weight to continue the climb. The temperature drops as the sun dips lower, sending cool drafts swirling along the ravine walls. The scent of pine deepens, mixed with the earthy dampness rising from below. Daniel's boots scrape against the stone, each small sound swallowed quickly by the narrowing night. Ridge gives a low, steady bark, guiding him toward a sturdier foothold. Daniel follows the dog's cue, grateful for the quiet intelligence in every movement. 2 more strides and his hand finds a jut of rock, firm enough to pull himself upward. The child sighs softly, her voice trembling like a thin ribbon of sound. Daniel pauses, listening to her breathing. It is faint, but steady, like a small light refusing to dim. He speaks to her in a low, calming tone, offering simple reassurance without expectation of response. Ridge steps closer to the edge as Daniel nears the top. The shepherd lowers his body, ears forward, as if ready to catch the first sign of struggle. Daniel makes one final push, gripping the rim and lifting himself onto stable ground. The forest floor feels warmer than the stone, layered with pine needles and soft dirt that cushions his steps. Ridge approaches immediately, nuzzling the child's foot with a tenderness that surprises Daniel. He kneels on one knee, carefully lowering her onto a patch of dry ground. She lies still, her eyes closed, but her breathing remains faintly rhythmic. Daniel removes his jacket and wraps it around her, tucking it beneath her chin to preserve the little warmth she has left. A gentle breeze moves through the trees, carrying the scent of distant rain. Ridge sits beside the child, posture tall yet gentle, as if guarding a fragile truth. Daniel looks toward the trail that leads back to the road, calculating the distance, the fading light, and the time he has before the cold grows sharper. He places a steady hand on Ridge's back and whispers, "We are not losing her." The words leave his mouth like a promise he intends to keep. Ridge responds with a soft, determined whine, as if agreeing to shoulder part of the weight. Together, in the dimming light of the Montana evening, they prepare to carry the child toward hope. Daniel gathers the child into his arms once more, feeling the small weight settle against his chest with a trust that humbles him. The air has cooled further, brushing against his skin with a crisp edge that warns him the night will fall faster than he expects. Ridge walks close to his side as he starts down the forest trail, his steps quiet on the soft pine needles, his ears tuned to every shift in the darkening woods. The trail is narrow but familiar enough for Daniel to move with purpose. The sky above holds onto the last traces of amber light, stretching them thin across the tops of the trees. Shadows lengthen and merge, creating a soft haze that seems to respond to each breath he takes. The child's pulse, faint as it is, presses gently against his arm. Her head rests near his shoulder, and from time to time a soft sound escapes her lips, something between a sigh and a question. Daniel lowers his voice, offering calm reassurance, speaking each word as if it might anchor her a little more firmly to the world. Ridge trots ahead several feet, then returns to his side, always circling back, checking the path, checking Daniel, checking the child. The dog's presence feels like a second heartbeat guiding them forward. When they reach a clearing where the trees open slightly, Daniel pauses to adjust his grip. The child shifts with a tiny murmur, her cheek brushing his jacket. The forest around them smells of cold earth and distant rain, a scent that seems to echo through the quiet. Ridge lifts his nose to the breeze, sensing something further down the trail. Daniel follows his gaze and sees the faint glimmer of the road beyond the tree line. Relief pushes through him, steady but fragile, like the first hint of dawn after a long night. He quickens his pace, but carefully, mindful of every step. The child's breathing wavers, then steadies again, a rhythm that keeps time with his own. As they near the road, the last light slips behind the hills, leaving a soft twilight glow across the gravel. Daniel kneels beside a fallen log, setting the child gently upon it while he checks her pulse again. It is faint, but present, a small flame holding on. Ridge sits close, leaning in just enough to offer warmth without disturbing her. Daniel places his jacket more securely around her small frame and whispers, "Stay with me." Ridge lowers his head beside the child's feet, his breath warm against the cold air. The world feels suspended, as if everything is waiting for the next breath she takes. Daniel looks toward the empty road stretching into the quiet evening, calculating how far his voice will carry, how quickly help might reach them once he calls. He draws a steady breath, preparing to shout for assistance, when a gentle sound beside him interrupts the silence. The child's fingers curl weakly around the fabric of his sleeve, a small gesture that feels like a spark in the deepening dusk. Ridge lifts his head, ears forward, sensing the moment. Daniel's eyes soften as he leans closer, knowing that even a fragile sign can guide a soul back toward the light. Daniel leans closer, feeling the faint tug on his sleeve as the child's fingers slowly loosen again, drifting back into stillness. The twilight has deepened into a soft blue hush, the kind that settles over the Montana hills like a held breath. A cool breeze sweeps across the road, carrying the distant scent of rain and pine needles. Ridge rises quietly beside them, his posture alert but calm, as if he senses that the night is shifting, drawing them toward a moment that requires both patience and faith. Daniel adjusts the jacket around the child's small shoulders, making sure the warmth stays close to her. Her breathing is thin but steady, a soft rhythm that lifts and falls against his arm like the wings of a tired bird. He places 2 fingers gently against the side of her neck, counting the faint pulses that echo beneath her skin. It is enough to keep him anchored. Enough to remind him why he cannot stop now. The road stretches empty in both directions, fading into shadows where the forest thickens. Daniel listens carefully, hoping for the distant hum of an engine, the crunch of tires, any sign of another soul passing by. But the only sound is the hush of wind threading through the trees and the steady, reassuring steps of Ridge pacing a slow circle around them. The shepherd pauses, nose lifted, sensing something beyond the quiet. Daniel follows his gaze toward the slope that leads down to a small meadow, its grass brushed silver by the growing moonlight. Then, faintly, he hears it, the distant rumble of a vehicle making its way along the winding road. Hope rises in his chest, quiet but certain. He gathers the child again, feeling how light she is, how fragile. Ridge trots to the edge of the roadside, ears perked, tail steady. The headlights appear first, sweeping across the curve like a soft beam cutting through the dusk. Daniel steps forward, raising one arm to signal. The vehicle slows, its tires crunching against the gravel before rolling to a gentle stop. A warm glow spills from the cabin light as the door opens, revealing an older couple, their faces etched with concern the moment they see the child wrapped in his jacket. Words are exchanged quickly, soft and worried, but Daniel's attention remains on the child's breathing, on the way her chest rises and falls with the smallest effort. The couple opens the back door, clearing space as Daniel carefully settles her onto the seat. Ridge places his front paws on the edge, watching her with deep, quiet focus, as if making sure she understands she is not alone. Daniel gently strokes the top of Ridge's head, whispering a steady reassurance. The dog presses closer, his breath warm against Daniel's hand. The couple prepares to drive toward the nearest medical center, and Daniel climbs into the back beside the child, keeping her close. Ridge sits just outside the door for a heartbeat longer, looking up at Daniel with an unspoken question. Then, with a calm certainty, he leaps inside and curls at the child's feet, ready to guard her through whatever comes next. The vehicle moves steadily along the winding road, its headlights carving gentle paths through the deepening night. Inside the cabin the air is warm, touched by the faint scent of fabric upholstery and the earth that Ridge carried in on his paws. Daniel sits close to the child, keeping one arm around her to steady her breathing as the road hums softly beneath them. The older couple speaks quietly in the front, their voices low and calm, creating a sense of safety that fills the small space. The child shifts slightly, her cheek brushing the collar of Daniel's jacket. Her eyelids flutter, opening just enough for a slip of brown to show before drifting closed again. Daniel leans in, speaking a soft reassurance, letting the warmth of his voice guide her back toward steadier breaths. Ridge lies curled at her feet, his body pressed close but gentle, radiating a calm that feels almost like a blanket. Every so often he lifts his head to check her, his amber eyes reflecting the passing lights as if carrying their own quiet glow. The road bends, offering brief glimpses of the valley below, where scattered porch lights flicker like small stars anchored to the earth. The sky above has darkened fully, but a thin silver moon hangs low over the ridge, casting a pale shimmer across the fields. The couple mentions the distance to the nearest medical center, estimating 10 more miles, their words wrapped in worry but softened by hope. Daniel listens, his hand resting lightly on the child's shoulder. Her breath catches once, then steadies again in a fragile rhythm. He lets his thumb trace a slow circle along the edge of the jacket, offering comfort through small, steady gestures. Ridge shifts his weight, laying his head against the child's shoes, his breath a warm reminder that she is not alone in this small battle for consciousness. The hum of the engine becomes a kind of lullaby, merging with the soft patter of wind against the windows. Daniel watches the child's face closely, noticing the faint color returning to her cheeks, the slow rise and fall of her chest growing just a little more assured with every passing minute. They crest a hill, and the glow of the town appears in the distance, a cluster of warm lights promising help. Daniel feels his chest loosen slightly, the tension uncoiling just enough for a breath of gratitude to settle in. The couple reassures him that the emergency entrance is open all night. The child stirs again, her fingers searching blindly until they find the sleeve of his jacket. She holds it with the faintest grip, a small tether pulling her toward safety. Daniel answers with a quiet whisper, steady and warm. Ridge lifts his head, tail giving a soft thump against the seat, as if echoing that reassurance. The vehicle turns onto the main road leading into town. Streetlights flicker overhead, casting moving shadows across the cabin. Daniel holds the child a little tighter as the medical center comes into view, its windows glowing softly in the night, like a beacon waiting for them. The medical center's lights glow steadily as the vehicle rolls to a gentle stop beneath the overhang, the golden beams reflecting softly across the windows like a quiet promise. Daniel tightens his hold on the child, feeling the small rise and fall of her breathing against his chest. Ridge lifts his head as the doors open, his amber eyes alert, watching every movement with careful focus. The older couple steps out first, waving urgently toward the entrance, but not with panic, rather with the steady urgency of people who understand that time matters in its own quiet way. A nurse appears almost immediately, her expression shifting to determined calm the moment she sees the child wrapped in Daniel's jacket. She gestures them inside, her voice low and gentle, directing him through the sliding doors that part with a soft hiss. The air inside is warm and carries the faint scent of antiseptic and freshly brewed coffee, a mix that speaks of late-night vigilance. Daniel follows the nurse through the hallway, each step measured so the child remains undisturbed. Ridge trots beside him until the nurse pauses, noticing the dog, her eyes widening slightly before softening. She kneels for a brief moment, offering her hand, and Ridge responds with a small nod before letting her pass. The nurse leads Daniel into a quiet examination room lit by a single overhead lamp that casts a soft halo across the bed. He lowers the child onto the crisp white sheet, tucking his jacket around her one last time. Her eyelashes flutter faintly, catching the warm light. A doctor arrives, moving with the composed confidence of someone who has walked through many urgent nights. He asks only a few questions, his voice low and steady, and begins to assess the child with gentle precision. Daniel steps back, giving space, his hands settling on Ridge's shoulders as if grounding himself through the dog's calm presence. Ridge sits tall, watching the doctor with silent attentiveness, his breath steady and warm against Daniel's side. The room grows quiet except for the soft beeping of a monitor and the whisper of the child's breath as the doctor listens closely. A moment passes, then another, each stretching thin like the last threads of twilight. The doctor finally lifts his gaze, offering Daniel a small nod that eases the tightness in his chest. The child's condition is delicate, but her pulse is gaining strength. She is responding. She is fighting her way back. The nurse adjusts a warm blanket over the child, smoothing it gently across her shoulders. Her movements are caring and precise, the kind that speak of long nights spent saving lives without ever raising. Her voice. Daniel exhales slowly, a breath that carries the weight of the ravine, the climb, the waiting, and the hope he dared to hold. Ridge leans forward, placing his chin lightly on the edge of the bed, watching the child with a devotion that feels almost sacred. The doctor steps aside, allowing Daniel to approach. The soft glow of the lamp reflects in the child's eyes as they open just a little more, finding him even through the haze of exhaustion. She does not speak, but her fingers reach faintly toward him in a delicate motion that holds all the meaning she cannot yet say. Daniel responds by placing his hand gently over hers, offering a steady warmth. Ridge shifts closer, his eyes soft, as if understanding that in this quiet room the smallest breath has become the brightest sign of hope. The child's fingers rest beneath Daniel's hand, small and warm now beneath the blanket, her breath growing steadier with each passing moment. The doctor steps out quietly to prepare additional care, leaving the room wrapped in a soft hush broken only by the gentle hum of machines. Ridge remains at the bedside, his chin still resting near the child's shoes, his eyes reflecting the golden glow of the lamp overhead. Daniel watches the rise and fall of the child's chest, noticing how the shallow rhythm has deepened, how each breath seems to reach just a little farther into the world. Her eyelids flutter again and she looks toward him, her gaze clearer this time, soft but searching. Daniel leans closer, offering a reassuring smile that carries the calm of someone who knows how to sit with uncertainty without letting it win. She whispers something faint, too soft for words to form, but the shape of her mouth conveys trust rather than fear. Ridge responds first, lifting his head and stepping an inch closer, his tail giving a quiet sweep across the floor. Daniel gently strokes the dog's neck, grounding them all in the moment. The nurse returns with warm fluids and a soft wool blanket, layering it carefully across the child while explaining that her body just needs time to recover from the cold. Her voice is warm, steady, and carries the gentle cadence of someone who has seen many difficult nights soften into mornings of relief. Daniel listens, nodding, though his attention remains on the child's small hand still tucked beneath his. When the nurse finishes, she gives them a knowing smile before stepping out again, closing the door with a quiet click that deepens the peace in the room. The lamp hums softly, casting a warm curve of light across the walls. Outside the window, the night settles deeper over the town, leaving only the moon to paint silver patterns across the empty parking lot. Ridge lifts his head fully now, moving around the bed to press his muzzle lightly against the child's blankets. She responds by shifting her fingers toward him, brushing the soft fur at his snout. It is a delicate gesture, but one filled with gratitude. Daniel feels something open in his chest, something he thought had closed long ago after too many nights in places far from here. A quiet gratitude, a small grace. The child's breathing evens out, her eyes closing as she drifts into a deeper rest. Daniel remains beside her, his hand still gently over hers. Ridge settles at the foot of the bed, curling into a protective curve, his body a warm sentinel against the quiet. The room feels held in a peaceful stillness, as if the very walls understand the fragile wonder unfolding within it. Daniel leans back slightly, exhaling a long breath that releases the weight he has carried since stepping into the ravine. For now, she is safe. And for the first time since the sun fell behind the hills, he allows himself to believe that the night may end not in fear, but in something far gentler. The quiet room holds its breath as the night deepens, the gentle hum of the monitor blending with the soft rhythm of the child's breathing. Daniel remains beside her, his posture steady but relaxed now, as if the weight that pressed on him since the ravine has finally loosened its grip. Ridge lies curled at the foot of the bed, his warm amber eyes half open, watching both the child and the marine with a devotion that feels almost ancient. Outside the window, the moon climbs higher over the Montana hills, casting a pale silver wash across the medical center's courtyard. The darkness seems softer here, less like an ending and more like a quiet space where fragile things can heal. Daniel leans closer as the child stirs again. Her fingers twitch beneath the blanket before. She slowly opens her eyes. There is more clarity in her gaze now, a faint spark of awareness returning. She blinks at the warm light above her, then turns her head slightly toward Daniel. He offers her a gentle smile, speaking softly so his words settle lightly in the room. She moves her lips, forming a quiet whisper. It is not the shape of fear, but the shape of a simple question, the kind a child asks when she wakes in a place she does not recognize. Daniel answers in the same calm tone that carried her through the long journey here, telling her she is safe, that she is warm now, that help has arrived. Ridge rises slowly, stepping closer to the head of the bed. The child notices him and a small flicker of warmth crosses her expression. She lifts her hand slightly, and Ridge leans just enough for her fingers to brush the soft fur at his cheek. Her small smile carries the hint of something blooming back to life. A nurse returns with warm liquids and checks the child's vitals, the glow of reassurance settling across her features as she records the improved numbers. She thanks Daniel with a quiet nod, understanding more than words can express. Daniel steps back so the nurse can work, but his eyes remain on the child, watching the way her breath has grown steadier, fuller, as if the warmth of the room has reached all the way into her small lungs. Ridge sits patiently by the bedside, tail resting against the floor, his presence forming a protective circle around her. When the nurse finishes and leaves the room, the child turns her head slightly toward Daniel again. Her voice is soft, no louder than a sigh, but clear enough. She whispers a simple thank you. Daniel's breath stills for a moment, touched by the humility in her tone. He places a hand gently over hers, offering a warmth that requires no words. Ridge gives a soft exhale, lowering his head to the blanket as if closing the circle of comfort around her. The child's eyes drift shut again, this time not from weakness but from the kind of rest that comes when one finally feels safe. Daniel leans back in the chair beside the bed, feeling a deep and quiet peace settle through him. Ridge shifts closer to the child's side, keeping his steady watch beneath the soft glow of the lamp. In that tender stillness, as the night holds them in its gentle embrace, it becomes clear that the smallest spark of hope has taken root, glowing softly in the dim room where a life has begun to return to itself. The night settles into a softer rhythm as the small room holds its quiet vigil. The gentle glow from the overhead lamp wraps the child, Daniel, and Ridge in a cocoon of warm stillness. Hours seem to pass like slow-moving clouds, barely noticeable except for the gradual deepening of the child's breaths. Daniel remains close, his hands resting loosely in his lap, his posture steady but softened by the peace settling through him. Ridge sleeps lightly at the foot of the bed, ears twitching at every small sound, his body curved protectively toward the child. The soft beep of the monitor continues its steady pattern, signaling the return of strength. Outside the window, the first hints of dawn begin to touch the sky, painting faint strokes of pale gold along the ridge. The quiet beauty of it draws Daniel's gaze for a moment. He watches the horizon brighten, the world waking gently after a long night. When he looks back at the child, he sees her eyes open again, this time with a fuller awareness. Her gaze drifts across the room before landing on him. There is a soft question in her expression, not spoken but clear. Daniel leans forward, offering a reassuring smile, letting her feel that she is not alone in this new morning. Ridge lifts his head, stretching his paws before stepping closer to the side of the bed. The child's eyes brighten when she sees him, and a tiny curve forms at the corner of her mouth. She reaches out, her fingers resting gently on his fur. Ridge responds with a soft exhale, lowering his head into her hand as if offering the quiet comfort that only a loyal animal can give. Daniel watches the exchange, feeling a deep sense of gratitude stir within him. The child's pulse is stronger, her color returning, her spirit flickering back to life like a small flame finding its breath. A nurse enters softly, carrying a warm cup of broth and a gentle smile that reflects the renewed hope filling the room. She checks the child's vitals, nodding with clear relief at the improvements. The child sips the warm liquid slowly, her hand steadying with each taste. After the nurse steps out again, Daniel sits closer, giving her the space to rest her head against the pillows. Her voice comes in a faint whisper, asking how she was found. Daniel speaks with the same calm cadence that guided her through the night, explaining that help arrived because Ridge had led him to the ravine. She turns her head toward the shepherd, her eyes full of wonder and quiet affection. Ridge responds by resting his paw gently on the edge of the blanket, as if acknowledging the bond forming between them. The early morning light grows stronger, casting golden rays across the room, warming the cold corners and illuminating the fragile miracle that has taken place. Daniel feels something settle in his heart as he watches the two of them, something steady and peaceful. The night's fear has given way to a morning filled with quiet grace. And in that soft light, surrounded by warmth and the promise of healing, he understands that the journey into the ravine brought them not just to danger, but to a life waiting to be renewed. Morning light spills gently across the room, settling on the child's face as she drifts in and out of rest. The warmth softens the shadows along the walls, turning the small space into a quiet sanctuary. Daniel sits beside her, hands folded loosely, watching the soft rhythm of her breathing with a gratitude that runs deeper than words. Ridge lies close to the bed, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half open as he keeps his steady watch. The child stirs, her fingers brushing the blanket before lifting slightly toward Daniel. He leans in, offering the calm presence that has carried her through the long night. She whispers a question, her voice thin but steady enough to carry through the soft hum of the room. She asks if he will stay until she wakes again. Daniel nods with a gentle smile, letting her see the sincerity in his eyes. Ridge rises, stepping closer so his muzzle can rest lightly near her hand. She traces her fingers along his fur, the small movement filled with trust. The doctor returns quietly, checking her vitals, his expression brightening at the continued improvement. He explains that the warmth, fluids, and rest are guiding her body back toward strength. His tone carries the steady reassurance of someone who has watched many fragile lives find their footing again. Daniel listens with a small nod, his hand still resting near the child's. Ridge follows the doctor's movements with attentive eyes, but remains calm, understanding the quiet rhythm of care now unfolding. When the doctor steps out, leaving the room once more in soft stillness, the child shifts, settling deeper into the blankets. The morning sun reaches farther into the room, its glow brushing her cheeks and giving them a gentle color that was absent through the night. Her breath comes easier, smoother, as if the warmth has woven itself into her lungs. Daniel leans back in his chair for a moment, feeling the weight of fatigue settle into his shoulders. But it is a peaceful tiredness, one softened by the presence of the shepherd at his feet and the steady recovery of the child before him. Ridge lifts his head to nudge Daniel's knee, offering a quiet comfort of his own. The child opens her eyes once more, gazing at both of them. There is a softness in her expression now, a recognition that reaches beyond fear. She whispers a quiet thank you, her voice fuller than before. Daniel answers with a gentle reassurance, his voice carrying the calm certainty that she is safe. Ridge gives a soft wag of his tail, the slow, thoughtful kind that carries meaning without sound. The nurse brings a small cup of warm tea for Daniel and a fresh blanket for the child. She adjusts the pillows, her movements tender, then leaves them in the glow of the early day. The child's eyelids grow heavy again, her breaths deepening as she drifts back to sleep, no longer from weakness but from healing. Daniel watches her with quiet reverence, feeling something settle in his heart, a sense of grace unfolding in the stillness of the morning. Ridge settles back down, curling into a protective curve at the side of the bed, his presence steady and warm. And in that soft, golden light, Daniel understands that the smallest acts of courage and compassion have carried them all to this moment where peace finally finds its place. The morning brightens with a softness that settles gently across the room, filling every corner with a peaceful glow. The child sleeps soundly. Now, her breaths slow and even, her small hands resting above the blanket as if finally unburdened by the cold she fought through the night before. Daniel watches her for a long moment, letting the quiet miracle of her recovery sink into him like warm sunlight. Ridge lies beside the bed, his body curled in a protective arc, his steady breathing matching the calm rhythm of the room. When the child begins to stir, her eyes open with a clarity that was not there before. She looks around, taking in the morning light, the peaceful space, and then Daniel. A small smile touches her lips, soft but certain, as if she has finally stepped out of the shadow of fear and into a place where she feels safe. Daniel leans forward, offering the same gentle reassurance that carried her through the darkest hours. She lifts her hand toward him, and he places his own over it, letting her feel the warmth and presence she had clung to through the hardest moments. Ridge rises, stretching his paws before moving closer to the bed. The child reaches for him with more strength than before, her fingers brushing through his fur in a gesture that carries gratitude deeper than words. There is something sacred in the stillness that follows, a quiet understanding shared between them, as if the shepherd had carried her spirit back from the edge just as surely as Daniel carried her body. A nurse enters with the soft rustle of morning duties, her smile bright when she sees the child awake. She checks the monitors and nods with clear satisfaction, explaining gently that the danger has passed and her strength will return with rest and warmth. The child listens, her eyes drifting toward Daniel and Ridge every few moments, as if anchoring herself to the two figures who found her in the dark. When the nurse leaves, Daniel sits a little closer to the bed, his voice soft as he asks if she remembers anything. She shakes her head slowly, a hint of confusion passing across her face before she whispers that she only remembers the cold, the dark, and then the sound of footsteps coming toward her. Ridge's ears lift, and Daniel strokes the shepherd's back, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath the thick fur. The child reaches out again, placing her hand on Ridge's head. He responds with a gentle wag of his tail, lowering his head beside her arm, offering the quiet comfort that only loyalty can give. Daniel watches them, his chest warm with a feeling that is not pride, but something deeper. A humble gratitude for the small miracle that unfolded in the ravine, for the breath that returned, for the life that continues. The sun climbs higher, pouring more light across the room, turning the edges of the blankets and the child's hair into strands of gold. The peaceful glow settles around them like a blessing, soft and steady. Daniel lets the stillness hold him, understanding without needing to say it aloud that sometimes the smallest act of faith carries a soul back to safety. And in that warm, quiet moment, with Ridge standing guard and the child resting in the calm of a new day, he knows that some miracles do not shout. They arrive on gentle breaths, in open hands, and in the quiet devotion of a shepherd who refused to turn away.